When you hear the phrase spiritual warfare, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For a lot of people, it's a topic that's just full of confusion and maybe even a little bit of mystery. So today, we're going to crack open the book of Ephesians and see if we can find some real clarity. Let's dive in. And really, when you get down to it, the whole debate seems to boil down to this one question, doesn't it? Is spiritual warfare a literal, actual, cosmic fight against demonic beings, or is it just a powerful metaphor for, our own internal struggles with right and wrong? And these two different ideas, they tend to create these two extreme views that we see all the time. On one hand, you've got the sensational view, all about confronting demons and territorial battles. And on the other, you've got the psychological view, which sees the whole thing as a metaphor. But the argument we're looking at today says that, actually, both of them kind of miss the point. So, here's where it gets really interesting. The argument goes that all this confusion exists for one simple reason. We almost always start the discussion at the end of the story. We jump straight to the armor of God in Ephesians 6. But to really get it, we have to go back to the beginning of the letter. Okay, so let's actually build this argument from the ground up the way the letter does. We're starting in Ephesians chapter 1 with the absolute foundation, Christ's authority as the victorious king. Seriously, everything else is going to rest on this one point. Yeah, the text really doesn't pull any punches here. This isn't some hope for the future or a possibility. It's presented as a done deal, a current reality. Christ is already seated, enthroned, and positioned far above any other power you could possibly name. And this is so crucial to get. The letter opens not with a battle cry, but with a victory speech. Before we even think about fighting, the text lays out a cosmic chain of command. And figuring that out, that's the real starting point for everything that follows. And the text even uses these really specific words for these powers, like cosmocratatores, which basically means world rulers. And this tells us two huge things. First, the author sees these powers as real things, not just some fuzzy metaphor. But second, and this is the big one, their dominion has been decisively subordinated. They're real, all right, but they're also defeated. Okay, so Christ's authority is the foundation. Check. But what does that have to do with us, with believers? Well, this leads us to the second key idea. And honestly, it might be the most shocking claim in the entire letter. Seriously, just let that sink in for a second. The exact same language used to describe Christ's enthronement is now being used for believers. The claim is that they're not just under his rule, they are seated with him. They actually share in that position of authority. You see how this just flips the whole script, right? If you're already co-enthroned, then spiritual warfare can't be about you fighting your way up to some position of power. It has to be about learning how to live from the power you've already been given. And this just keeps building. So, point 1, Christ is enthroned. Point 2, the church is seated with him. So what's the church's job? And the answer just turns everything we thought we knew on its head. It turns out the church itself becomes a message. This is just fascinating, right? The church isn't supposed to be hiding from these cosmic powers. It's actively showing something to them. The simple fact that the church exists, this new unified community, is meant to be a public service announcement to those defeated authorities. So get this. Things we think of as just nice church activities, unity, fellowship, they're not just internal feel-good things. In this way of thinking, they are cosmic political statements. They are a living, breathing proclamation that the old world order, the one run by these hostile powers, is broken, and a new one has started. Okay, and now, only now, with all that groundwork laid, Christ's victory, our position with him, the church's role, now we can finally go to that famous armor of God passage. And you'll see, it looks completely different. Because we're not starting here cold, right? We're arriving here at the end of a long, carefully built argument. We're not just reading a random command to fight, we're reading the conclusion to a theological masterpiece. So let's just run through the logic one more time. 1, Christ is in charge. 2, believers share his position. 3, the church's very existence shouts this victory from the rooftops. So what's the conclusion? It's that the armor isn't for launching some new attack, it's for holding the ground that's already been won. And if you actually go and read that passage, you can't miss it. The command that gets repeated over and over again is stand. The goal isn't to go out and conquer new territory. Christ already did that. The whole point is to stay put, to hold your position on ground that is, yeah, still contested, but has ultimately been reclaimed. And then look at what the armor is actually made of: truth, righteousness, peace, faith. I mean, these aren't exactly aggressive weapons you'd use for an assault, right? They're the qualities of someone who is loyal, someone who is stable in their allegiance to the victorious king. They're what lets you stand your ground without getting knocked over. Okay, so what does this all add up to? Well, it completely reframes what we mean by spiritual warfare. It moves away from those two extremes we talked about at the beginning and gives us a totally new and honestly much more practical paradigm. And here's what it looks like in practice. On this contested territory we live on, just being stable is a proclamation of victory. Your simple faithfulness becomes an act of resistance, and your unity with other believers, that becomes an act of judgment on the very powers that thrive on division. So when you boil it all down, the argument is this: spiritual warfare isn't so much about these big, theatrical, exorcism-type moments. It's much more about the quiet, daily, grinded-out obedience. It's about living out the truth of a victory that's already been won. And that leaves us with one last, kind of provocative question to think about. What if our whole focus has been a little bit off? What if the key to victory in our daily lives isn't about trying to fight harder, but about learning how to stand firmer in a victory that's already ours?